My rich son refused $2,000 for my cancer surgery, looked me dead in the eye over his marble countertop, and said money was tight. That same night, my daughter, drowning in debt, emptied her savings into my hands. What none of them knew: the diagnosis wasn't the only thing I'd been hiding, and the will was about to change everything. Hello, everyone. Today's story was inspired by a viewer submission and adapted into a full story just for you. If you'd like to share your own story, the submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's get into it. Let me take you back 3 months to the afternoon I got the diagnosis that started all of this. My name doesn't matter much. I'm 63. I spent 40 years as a carpenter, and I built the house I still live in with my own hands. My wife passed 4 years ago. Since then, it's been quiet, too quiet some days, but I had my routine, my tools, and the belief that I'd raised two good kids. I was right about one of them. The doctor's office was cold. I remember that. The chair was hard and the lighting was too bright. The doctor sat across from me, folded his hands, and told me I had cancer. Stage 2, treatable. He said if we move fast, surgery first, then we'd see. I nodded like I understood. I didn't, not really. You don't understand a thing like that the moment you hear it. It sits with you later, in the car, in the dark. Then came the part nobody warns you about, the billing office. They ran my insurance, typed for a while, and told me there'd be a gap. $2,000 out of pocket before they could schedule the operation. $2,000 I didn't have sitting around. I'm not a man who asks for help. I never have been. But this wasn't a new fence or a leaky roof. This was my life. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to my son's house to ask. Marcus did well for himself. Tech money. He's got a place behind a gate with a driveway longer than the street I grew up on. I sat at his kitchen island while he stood on the other side of it, arms crossed, and I told him everything. The diagnosis, the surgery, the $2,000. He didn't even pause. Things are tight right now, Dad, he said. The renovations, Vanessa's car. You know how it is. You'll figure it out. You always do. I looked at him. I looked at the marble under my hands, the kind of stone that costs more per foot than I made in a week back in my prime. I looked at the wine fridge behind him, glowing soft and blue, and I understood that my son had $2,000. He just didn't have it for me. I didn't argue. I stood up, told him to take care, and drove home. That night, I sat in the dark and didn't tell a soul how bad it really was. I should mention, Marcus had no idea what I'd been keeping from all of them. I didn't tell Emma. I want that on the record. I never went to her, never called, never hinted. She was already carrying enough. Emma is my daughter. She's 34, raising two kids on her own after her husband walked out 3 years ago. She works at a hospital in the billing department of all places, pulling double shifts whenever they'll let her. She rents a small apartment on the east side of town. Money is always tight for her, but it's a different kind of tight than Marcus meant. Hers is the real kind. That's how she found out, actually. The billing department. My paperwork crossed the desk 2 cubicles down from hers, and a coworker mentioned the name without thinking. Emma saw the rest herself, the diagnosis, the surgery, the unpaid balance. She showed up at my door that same evening. I opened it, and she was standing there with her coat still on, her eyes red, her two kids waiting in the car. Dad, she said, why didn't you tell me? I tried to wave it off. I told her it was nothing I couldn't handle, that she had her own plate full, that I didn't want her worrying. She wasn't having any of it. She came inside and put an envelope on my kitchen table. I didn't open it right away. I just looked at it. It's everything I've got, she said, and I took a little extra to cover the rest. I knew what a little extra meant. It meant one of those payday loans, the kind with interest that eats you alive. She'd gone and put herself in a hole to fill mine. A woman who counts every dollar, who skips her own lunch so her kids don't skip theirs. I told her no. I pushed the envelope back across the table and told her I wouldn't take it. I told her she had children to think about, rent to pay, a life to hold together. She pushed it right back. You're my father, she said. You don't get to do this alone, not while I'm breathing. I looked at her standing there in my kitchen, tired and stubborn and so much like her mother it hurt. Same set to the jaw, same refusal to back down. And I realized something sitting at that table. My son had a wine fridge and a marble island and turned me away. My daughter had nothing, and she emptied it out without a second thought. I took the envelope, not because I needed it the way she thought I did, but because telling her the truth right then would have taken something away from her. She needed to be the one who showed up, so I let her. I hugged her at the door and watched her drive off with the kids. Then I went inside, sat down, and started thinking about everything none of them knew about me. Hey everyone, quick pause here. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a second to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. All right, let's get back to it. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. I checked in early that morning. Emma was there before me, somehow sitting in the waiting room with two coffees and a face that hadn't slept. She dropped the kids with a neighbor. She held my hand right up until they wheeled me back, and she told me she'd be there when I woke up. She was. The surgery went the way the doctor hoped. They got what they needed to get. He told me recovery would be slow, that I'd be sore and tired for weeks, that I'd need to take it easy and let people help me. That last part was always the hard one for me. I spent 4 days in that hospital bed. Emma came every single one of them. She brought the kids when she could, and they sat on the end of the bed and told me about school while she fixed my pillows and asked the nurses questions I was too tired to ask myself. She knew the system from the inside, so nothing got past her. She made sure I was taken care of. Marcus did not come. He sent one text. I still remember it word for word because it was so short. Hope it went okay. Slammed it. Talk soon. That was it. No call, no visit. His father was cut open on an operating table and he was slammed at work. I didn't write back. There wasn't anything to say. Lying in that bed gave me a lot of time to think. And the thing I kept coming back to was how differently my two children saw me. To Emma, I was her father, plain and simple, a man worth showing up for. To Marcus, I was something else. I'd become a problem to manage. An old man with a small house and a leaky retirement, someone to handle when convenient and ignore when not. And here's the thing he never bothered to learn. Everybody assumed they knew exactly what I was. A broke old carpenter in a worn-out house, scraping by on a fixed income. They saw the pickup truck with 200,000 miles on it and the same flannel shirts I'd worn for a decade, and they filled in the rest of the story themselves. They were wrong. They'd always been wrong. But I'd never had a reason to correct them. I'd spent my whole life letting people underestimate me because, frankly, it told me everything I needed to know about who they really were. You learn a lot about a person by how they treat someone they think has nothing to offer them. By the time they discharged me, I'd made a decision. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I was clear. For the first time in a long time, I knew precisely what I was going to do. I just had a few phone calls to make first. About 2 weeks after I got home, Marcus called. Not a text this time, an actual phone call. I almost didn't recognize the number on my screen because he so rarely used it. I picked up, and there he was, warm as anything, asking how I was feeling, telling me he'd been meaning to come by. I let him talk. I've learned that if you stay quiet long enough, people tell you what they actually want. It took him about 4 minutes to get there. He said he'd been thinking about the future. He said he worried about me, alone in that old house, getting older, recovering from surgery. He said maybe it was time we got my affairs in order. Smart planning, he called it. Get ahead of things. Then he got to the point, the house. He suggested very gently that I sign the house over to him. For estate purposes, he said. To make things simpler down the road, avoid taxes, avoid headaches, he'd handle everything. I wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Now, I want to tell you what I knew that he didn't think I knew. That old house of mine sits on a piece of land most people drive past without a second look. But the town had been growing for years, pushing out in my direction. A developer had already approached me twice about the surrounding parcels. The land under my feet was worth a great deal more than the worn-out house standing on it. And I had reason to believe Marcus had figured that out. I also had reason to believe Marcus needed money, badly. I started paying attention to the small things, the way he mentioned, too casually, that he and Vanessa had scaled back some plans. The fact that the long-promised renovations never seemed to actually happen. A man who claimed $2,000 was too tight to spare doesn't talk like a man whose accounts are healthy. I'd built things my whole life. I know when a structure is starting to fail before it shows on the surface. So I played along. I told him it was a lot to think about. I told him I appreciated him looking out for me. I asked him to give me some time, that I was still tired from the surgery and didn't want to rush a big decision. That answer satisfied him. He thought he'd planted the seed and just had to wait for it to grow. He told me he loved me before he hung up. First time I'd heard that from him in years. He only said it because he wanted something. I set the phone down and sat at my kitchen table for a long while. He thought I was a confused old man with one asset he could talk his way into. He had no idea that I'd already seen the whole game and that I'd started moving the pieces before he ever made his first call. Let me back up and tell you the part nobody in my family ever knew. I never made my money as a carpenter. Not the real money, anyway. The carpentry paid the bills and put food on the table while my kids were growing up. But sometime in my late 30s, I got tired of a tool that didn't work right. A clamp and jig system for cabinet work. Every carpenter I knew complained about the same problem, and nobody had fixed it. So I fixed it myself, out in my garage, over the better part of 2 years. I patented it. I didn't expect much. But a tool company licensed it, and then another, and the checks started coming in. Small at first, then steady, then more than steady. For close to 25 years now, that patent has paid me a royalty on every unit sold, and it's sold very, very well. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my wife knew the full size of it, though she knew about the patent itself. I took those checks and I did the boring thing with them. I bought land when it was cheap, including the parcels around my own house. I invested carefully, the slow and quiet way, and I never touched the principal. I let it grow for 2.5 decades. The truth is, I'm a wealthy man, considerably more than my son, who borrowed and leveraged his way into the appearance of money. Mine is real and it's paid for. I kept living in the same house, driving the same truck, wearing the same flannel shirts, for one simple reason. I wanted to know who my people really were. Money changes how others treat you, and I'd watched it ruin folks I grew up with, so I kept it quiet. I figured if I lived plain, the people who loved me would love the man, not the bank account. It turned out to be the smartest test I ever ran. I just didn't enjoy the results where my son was concerned. After Marcus made his play for the house, I drove out to see an old friend. Daniel and I went back 40 years. He'd become an estate attorney, one of the good ones, and he'd handled my affairs quietly for a long time. I sat down in his office and laid it all out. The diagnosis, the $2,000, Marcus and the house, Emma and the envelope. Daniel listened to the whole thing without interrupting. "So what do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to make sure the right person's is taken care of," I said, "and I want to make sure the wrong one can't touch any of it." He nodded and reached for a fresh legal pad. We spent the rest of that afternoon putting everything in order. By the time I left his office, the pieces were in place. Marcus just didn't know it yet. Marcus didn't wait long before he pushed again, and this time he didn't come alone. He called ahead and said he and Vanessa wanted to stop by, that they'd bring dinner, that it would be nice to spend time together. I told him that sounded fine. I knew exactly what it really was. They showed up with takeout, neither of them had cooked, and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Emma had pushed that envelope across to me. Marcus did most of the talking. Vanessa nodded along on cue. It started gentle. They were worried about me, living alone after surgery at my age in a house with stairs. What if I fell? What if something happened and nobody knew for days? They'd been talking, they said, and they thought I might be happier somewhere with people around. A facility. A nice one, Vanessa added quickly, like the word nice softened it. Then came the papers. Marcus slid a folder across the table. Power of attorney, he explained, just in case, so that if anything happened, somebody could make decisions for me, handle the money, handle the house, handle everything. He said it like he was doing me a favor. He even had a pen ready. I asked him, calm as I could manage, why he thought I couldn't handle my own decisions. That's when he showed his real face. He said I clearly wasn't thinking straight. That I'd turned down help and then gone and let Emma drain her savings, which made sense to him. That a man in his right mind would have handled the surgery differently. And then he said the thing I'll never forget. Look, Dad, I couldn't just hand you that $2,000, he said. I wasn't going to enable whatever this is. Somebody in this family has to be responsible. Enable. He used the word enable. About his father's cancer surgery. I sat there and I let it land. Vanessa looked at her plate. Marcus held my gaze like he believed every word. Like turning his back on me had been some act of tough love he deserved credit for. I didn't raise my voice. I found that the calmer you stay, the more people show you who they are. I told him I needed to think about the papers. I told him these were big decisions and I wasn't going to sign anything at a dinner table over cold takeout. He didn't like that. I could see it. He'd expected me to be tired enough, scared enough, grateful enough to just sign. But he covered it with another smile and said, of course, no rush. Take my time. They left within the hour. I stood at the window and watched their car pull out of my driveway. And I thought to myself, you want me to sign papers, son? All right, we're going to have a signing. You just won't like what's on the page. The next morning, I got to work. I called Daniel first. I told him about the dinner, the facility talk, the power of attorney, the word enable. He didn't say much, but I could hear the pen scratching on his end. He told me to do one thing before anything else. Keep records. So I did. That folder Marcus left on my table, I kept it. I wrote down everything he'd said, the date, the words as close to exact as I could remember. I saved the text messages, the short one from the hospital, and every message since. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it because Daniel told me that when people get cut out of money, they fight, and a man should have his house in order before that day comes. Then I finished what we'd started in his office. I moved the assets that needed moving, the investment accounts, the land parcels, the royalty income from the patent. Daniel structured so the bulk of it would pass cleanly and quickly, with no opening for anyone to contest it or tie it up in court. We set up a trust. I named the beneficiaries myself, in writing in front of witnesses. Everything was documented, dated, and locked down tight. While I was at it, I did some quiet checking on Marcus. I didn't have to dig hard. A few calls to people who knew people. The picture came together fast. My son was overextended on everything. 2 mortgages he could barely service. Investments that had gone sideways. He'd been counting on something to bail him out, and I had a strong feeling that something was my house, and whatever he assumed I'd leave behind. That's why the timing lined up with my surgery. He saw a window and went for it. The other thing I did was the most important. I looked into what Emma had done for me, all of it. I went back through everything, the envelope, the payday loan she'd taken, which I confirmed she was still paying off with interest she couldn't afford. The shifts she'd picked up. The fact that she never once, not a single time, asked me for anything. She didn't know about the patent. She didn't know about the land or the accounts. To her, I was just her broke father who needed help, and she gave everything she had anyway. That's the difference between my 2 children, laid out plain. One tried to take from a man he thought had a little. The other gave to a man she thought had nothing. Once everything was in place, I made one more call. I invited the whole family to dinner at my house that Sunday. Marcus, Vanessa, Emma, the grandkids. I told them I had news about the estate that everyone needed to hear together. Marcus called me back within 10 minutes, eager as could be. He thought he'd won. He had no idea what was waiting for him at that table. Marcus came out of his chair. He said I couldn't do this. He said it wasn't fair. He said he was my son, my firstborn, and that everything was supposed to come to him. He threw his hands around and his voice climbed until the kids looked scared and Emma pulled them closer. I let him go for a minute. Then Daniel spoke up, calm and even, and explained that it was already done. The trust was irrevocable. The assets were already moved. There were witnesses, there was documentation, and there were no grounds to contest any of it. Marcus could hire every lawyer in the state, and he wouldn't find a crack to get a finger into. That's when the desperation showed through, because here's what came out. Marcus needed that money. He needed it badly. The picture I'd put together turned out to be even worse than I thought. He was drowning. 2 mortgages, failed investments, debt stacked on debt. He'd been holding it all together with appearances, the gate and the marble and the wine fridge, while the whole thing was hollow underneath. He'd been counting on my estate to pull him out. That's why he refused the $2,000. He didn't have it to give. He'd turned his back on his dying father because he was too proud to admit he was broke. He said as much, finally, in front of everyone. Not as an apology, as an excuse. He told me I should understand that he was under pressure, that he never thought I'd actually find out about any of it. I told him I understood completely. I told him I understood that when his father needed help with a surgery that might save his life, my son chose his pride over me, and that when I had nothing to offer her, his sister chose me anyway. I told him that was the whole test, and he'd failed it on his own, without any help from me. Vanessa tried a softer angle. She started talking about family, about forgiveness, about how we should all move past this. I told her she was welcome to talk to me about forgiveness the day she returned the $2,000 she never gave. Then I turned to Emma. She was crying, but not for the reasons Marcus assumed. She told me she didn't want the money. She said she would have given me that envelope 100 times over and never asked for a thing. She said all she ever wanted was her father. And that right there was exactly why she was getting all of it. Because she meant it. Marcus left that night with nothing but his collapsing house of cards and the truth laid bare in front of his whole family. Vanessa followed him out. The door closed behind them. Emma stayed. The kids stayed. We cleaned up the dishes together, the 4 of us, and for the first time in a long while, my house felt like a home again. It's been about 8 months now since that dinner. My recovery went well. Better than the doctors hoped, honestly. I went to every follow-up, did everything they told me, and the last round of tests came back clean. They tell me I caught it early enough, that the surgery did its job, that I have many good years ahead of me. I intend to use them. The first thing I did, once I was steady on my feet, was take care of Emma. Not with a lump sum dropped in her lap, because that's not how you help someone like her. I sat down with her and we did it the right way. I paid off that payday loan the same week, every cent of it, with the interest that had been eating her alive. Then I helped her buy a house, a real one, with a yard for the kids and no landlord and no fear of the next rent increase. She cried when we signed the papers. So did I, a little. She still works at the hospital. She wants to. That's just who she is. But she doesn't lie awake doing math anymore. The kids are in a better school. There's food in the fridge and breathing room in her life, and she earned every bit of it long before she ever knew I had a dime. As for Marcus, I heard things through the family grapevine. The house behind the gate went into foreclosure a few months after that dinner. The marble, the wine fridge, all of it gone. He and Vanessa moved into something far smaller. I won't pretend I didn't feel something when I heard, but it wasn't satisfaction, not really. It was just the natural end of the road he chose for himself. He built his life on appearances and borrowed money and pride, and it came down the way those things always do. He reached out once. A long message about how he'd been wrong, how he wanted to make things right, how family was what mattered. I read it twice. I noticed it arrived only after he'd lost everything, not before. The same pattern as always. He only ever came to me when he needed something. I haven't decided yet whether there's a road back for him. Maybe someday. But it'll be on honest terms or not at all, and he'll have to show me with more than words. Here's what I learned through all of it. The money was never the point. It was only ever a test, and I didn't even mean for it to be one. I lived plain my whole life, and that simple choice told me everything about who actually loved me. My son measured me in dollars and came up wanting. My daughter gave me everything she had when she thought I had nothing. She passed the test she never knew she was taking, and in the end, she got the last laugh right alongside her old man. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.